This is Raphael.
I'm Loryn.
We're the Pacheco siblings, and welcome to the Hypercube podcast, a talk show in which two siblings converse about anything and everything. All right, at it again.
All right.
So here's a hot take I've been thinking about. It's not my hot take. I will say this.
Oh,
but
this is a regurgitated hot take.
Yes. But I'm repeating it because I agree with it 110%. It's not my hot take. I first heard it from Zach Reno, one of the two of the pair who do Off Book, the improvised musical podcast, which is a phenomenal podcast.
A phenomenal comedic pair.
Yeah, yeah. Zach and Jess, they're amazing. But I first heard this hot take from Zach Reno. Wasn't his hot take either. He was regurgitating it from somebody else. But so this is my third hand. This is my third hand hot take that I'm about to give you.
All right.
You ready for this third hand used hot take?
I used hot take. Oh. Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with it, Raph.
So here's the thing. If Jack Black wasn't so darn funny, we would probably rightfully consider him one of the greatest singers of our generation.
Dude, okay, hold on. That's not even a hot take. That's just true.
Right? That's just 110% true. Right? Like, it's so weird when you put it that way. Because it's true, though. Like, that's the weirdest part about it. It's like,
I mean, he has what, 5-6 octaves of range?
It's ridiculous. But yeah, he has an incredible voice. He's an incredibly gifted singer. Yeah. But it's like legitimately the only reason we don't consider him one of the greatest singers probably of all time is the fact that he's so darn funny, right? I guess that
it's because he falls under the comedic genre. So I was like, we don't have to take him seriously. It's like, dude's killing it.
Yeah, he's so conditioned us to not take him seriously that you kind of naturally do so, even in the face of genuine talent.
Have you seen his YouTube channel?
I don't know if I have seen his YouTube channel.
Jablinski Gaming?
All right, I think you showed me a little bit of it once, but yeah.
Yeah, it's so dumb. And it's like, that's Jack Black. He's just being a dad. And just I think the whole thing is he's going around showing his kids old school arcade stuff before they die. And so it's a gaming channel, but it's all done in arcades.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
I know, right? And it's like, he's just cracking dad jokes the whole time. And he's just being a big bearded dad. And it's like, this dude, he's a genuinely, not only is he a genuinely good singer, he's also a straight up A-list celebrity sometimes.
Right, yeah, sometimes. In his off time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's the classic. Well, I guess that this is rooted in a lot of different traditions, right? It's kind of like the drunken boxer kind of thing, right? Where he fools you into thinking that he's some sort of punchline, but the joke is that he's actually really, really impressively talented. Yeah, but it's also
extremely impressively talented.
I think it's also part of the clown tradition, right? Where that's true. That's sort of, he plays this sort of jester role in popular culture where he's the fall guy, right? He's the one who he invites you to point at him and laugh, which really distracts from the fact that he is an absolutely brilliant singer. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's my third hand hot take, but it's 110% true. That is the only reason we don't consider him as great of a singer as he is.
Jack Black, I remember for the longest time was one of my personal just in general, just idols. I was gonna say like music idols, but just in general, I love that his movies are fantastic. I haven't seen any of his recent stuff though, but just because I haven't been watching it, haven't had any time for movies. But yeah, School of Rock, fantastic movie. Yeah, just obviously there's the classic Pick Up Destiny, which is
Tenacious the Tenacious D movie, whole feature length Tenacious D film,
which is just his entire style of humor and vocal prowess and vocal prowess just front and center.
Right. It also retroactively, I don't think I could have appreciated it much at the time when that film first came out. Just the sheer amount of talent that is in that film generally. There's a lot of people in that, but you got Dio and Meatloaf in the opening sequence.
Yeah,
and it's whoa,
the first song.
Whoa.
The first song, Meatloaf is his dad, and Dio is his idol. It's okay.
Which is perfect. That's just the way it works.
That's just how it do.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, Zach Reno also posited this clarification is that there might be like an alternate universe in which Meatloaf didn't happen. Dude, and Jack Black was the first.
I hate to say it. I love Meatloaf. Meatloaf is great. I love Meatloaf. Again, as an actor and as like musical talent. If Jack Black was Meatloaf, he would have had a better career. Because you hear like Meatloaf talk about like how people only think of him as a singer, and like he doesn't really get a lot of the acting gigs that he would like pure acting gigs, because like he's a pretty good actor. He was in Fight Club, I think some other stuff as well. Obviously, he played Jack Black's dad in Pick Up Destiny, but that was again a singing role, right? So like people think of him as a singer. It's like, no, like I want to do acting. I want to be seen as an actor. I want to do more acting stuff. Jack Black has that. He has both singing roles, acting, singing roles, and it's fantastic. Like he has the career that Meatloaf wanted.
It's very true. I guess I think that inverse kind of goes both ways.
But honestly, though, what we have with Meatloaf and with Jack Black is probably for the best, because we did get both of them, and they're both doing fantastic work.
Yeah, absolutely phenomenal.
But on the topic of vocal ranges that blow my mind, we were talking about this a little bit before the podcast. So we went out to a little like event yesterday. It was like a winter festival event type thing, outdoor event, live music, food vendors, live performances or live performers. Because I think there were these two girls. I have no idea if they were part of the event or not, or they were just showing up. But they were like hula girls. They had like LED hula hoops, and they're just walking around hulaing. I was like, that's dope. Are they supposed to be here? Or are they just like here for like us? Are they just like enjoying the vibes? Or are they part of the event? Are they supposed to be here? And then on stage, when we first got to the festival, there was this live performance by this fellow who had an amazing singing voice. It blew my mind. I swear, he had maybe like half an octave range. It was bad, Raph. It was really bad.
Which is exceptional in and of itself. Like, when was the last time you got to hear bad live music? Like, it seems like whenever you hear live music, like
this dude was going up there.
Right. If somebody has a venue, if somebody got a gig.
This is a gig.
Usually it tends to be pretty good. This was exceptional.
Yeah. Like, this was like, this dude went up on stage with the full confidence of weekend karaoke. I mean, like, he was dressed up. He had like an outfit or whatever, and like he had like a thing going on. But I think he was just like an older gentleman, maybe like at least middle-aged or higher, right? So I don't know if it was just like this was his thing. It was very like, I don't know, talky, singy type of stuff.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and it's like, because like he was doing like, because he played songs that I liked, which is the worst when it's sung badly. Because like he was doing songs that like are supposed to be like super exciting and everything, and he's like, nah, we're gonna do it like smoky jazz lounge, where this is the only way that I sing, just like this, exactly like this. The whole song is like this.
Oh no!
And I was like, ooh. Yeah, that was he made a decision. It wasn't a good one, but he had a character, I guess.
Right. So that was bad.
That was bad. Thankfully, the second people, there was a duo who went up. Oh, the thing about that guy too, like the singing was the only live music part about it. 'Cause he had a recorded backing track and recorded backing vocals. The backing vocals are way better than he was. And it was just like, coming through the PA system. But the people who went after him, that was fantastic. It was this duo, these two dudes, significantly younger, I imagine, and it was a singer and a acoustic guitar pairing, and that was great, because they were doing like love ballads and like slow jams, and I was like, oh yeah, this is it. Like, the night is coming on, like, because I mean it's winter down here, so it gets dark at like 5:30.
Right.
So it's like, all right, yeah, like, night's coming on, we got like all this good food, these good vibes, and it's like just slow jam music coming on. It's like, yeah, this is pretty cool.
That's right. I forgot to mention that too, that I think we haven't drawn attention to the fact that you've changed countries again since the last podcast recording.
Yeah, this is true. I am back in Australia again. It's winter here.
Yeah.
Me and Rose went to that festival, so I'm here with Rose in Australia.
But
She
yeah.
almost wanted to say hi, but she shook her head. We actually had a ton of stuff on that day. On the way to that festival, we actually stopped by like a couple of shops and just had some fun. There's a place here that is very nearby that I did not realize was this close, and it makes me feel sad. I feel like I wasted the entire 3 months last time.
Oh, what is this?
The shop is just called Warhammer. That's it. It's just called Warhammer.
Just Warhammer. In the future,
it's
there are
Warhammer.
no other shops. Only war.
Only Warhammer. And it's dope. It obviously lots of Warhammer, but they have a bunch of minis. They have a bunch of terrain stuff.
A whole miniature shop?
Yes. Its whole thing, I think, is miniatures, because the middle area, so like they have the walls with the products and everything on the sides of the walls. In the middle, they just had tables set up for painting and constructing minis and like terrain and stuff like that. It was fantastic. Apparently, they have this thing called Mini of the Month, where for free you can come in, they'll give you a mini.
Ooh.
And you can assemble it and paint it, because these aren't the minis that come in one piece that they're just like either 3D printed or whatever. So these are the classic old school minis, where old school, like even before like tabletop minis. This is like just like hobbyist stuff where it's like you have like cars or stuff like that.
Right, model.
It comes in
model stuff.
Yeah, it comes in those panels that you cut out and then glue together. Right.
Mm-hmm.
First time I've ever done that. I assembled a mini from the panels, cut them out, assembled it, sanded it down. And then we're going to go back later at some point and paint them, because we had limited time. We only had time to assemble. But man, I'm going to spend so much time in that shop.
Sweet. Wow. And do they run like Warhammer tables there too?
So they said they were going to, because I think they just came under a new manager. I think she said is like she just started. So she's like getting like, used to everything first.
Right.
And then they're going to start doing game nights and tabletop stuff. And
wow.
I was like, yes. Tell me when. Let me know.
That's super cool.
Put me on the list.
Super cool.
Yeah, and it's actually pretty close, and it's dope.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's a neat experience.
Yeah, so I've got this mini sitting on the table behind me, ready to get painted. It's not primed, so we're going to prime it, then paint it.
I have to put pictures on the community server when you get that painted up.
Yes, I will. We have some pictures of the assembly, but we're going to post those probably all in one big thing.
Yeah. Oh, man. That's exciting. That's exciting. You're finding some local tabletop community.
Yeah. I need to find some place that does more fantasy D&D stuff, because I want to run some games. I want to DM for some people.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to play Warhammer, but it's a completely different skill set.
Mm. Well, speaking of D&D, we got to talk about what we've been talking about off stream a bit, which is 1D&D.
Yes.
Because that was the thing that was announced recently. Not D&D 1, 1D&D, right? That's how it goes.
Yep. 1D&D.
1D&D.
It's like One Nation or something, except for it's D&D.
I guess. But I mean, we've had our discussions and we've aired our opinions about it informally off stream or off recording. And yeah, I guess we could kind of continue some of that discussion here, because it's kind of interesting. I saw the announcement featurette that they did, that big promo that they did as part of their Wizards Presents live broadcast. And you kind of looked into some more of the playtest materials, the Unearthed Arcana and whatnot that came with that. And you presented a lot of the stuff that apparently is in development. And what it sounds like to me, this is my kind of take, is they made a whole hullabaloo, dare I say, about it still being 5th edition, right? And they've been adamant about that for a while, is that they want to stick with the 5th edition platform. And you've speculated for a long time that that's what their plan was going to be, was to turn 5e into more of a platform that they could then expand upon in their design. And it looks like they're heading in that direction. But I'm less convinced that is the case now. I feel like after hearing about a lot of what they're playtesting, I feel like this is more of a proper 6th edition. But you're arguing it's more of like a 5.5e of really solidifying the rules changes that they've made already to 5th edition.
Yeah. So 5th edition. So like I think what they mean is, I think what they're trying to say is that 5th edition was great, but ultimately unfinished. And this is the completion of 5th edition. So when they say like this is still 5th edition, what they actually mean is we're taking the ideas that we took in 5th edition and actually finishing a lot of the stuff that they did, because like let's be fair, 5th edition is great, but it is in no way perfect, and the Ranger is a good example of that.
I think it's I think it's mostly perfect, save for the Ranger.
But that's the thing.
It's like, but a lot of it is really solid design, though. That's the thing that I think works so well about 5e, is that like if you just take the PHB on its own, it is honestly a pretty masterful and complete system, I think.
Yeah.
Like,
but here's the problem.
Yeah.
I think this is the primary thing that is happening is that mechanically it's fantastic. Culturally, it's slightly problematic, because there's only so far you can go with mechanizing your birth before it starts getting into a little bit of eugenics territory, right? And there is some stuff that is like just like the wording or the way that you put together some of the character creation stuff, because that's currently the only thing that's come out is character creation changes. They're trying to kind of smooth over a lot of stuff where it's like mixed race stuff, as well as
because they had
having inherent abilities, like adding ability modifiers to races was just like, it's slightly questionable and it's pretty problematic when you consider that these are people who have culture and thinking, feeling people within their own world. Mechanizing that kind of stuff starts to get kind of into that territory of the history of it was that these people represented natives, or these people represented these other cultures. And now you're saying that these people can only do this thing. You're kind of diving into stereotypes, right? So they're trying to smooth over those kind of stuff.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, it's not like only they can do those things, but just that they have like a sort of affinity. They're at least stat wise.
But when you come down to play, especially when it comes to not like everyday table play, but like, what's that called? Their official.
Oh, you're talking about Adventure League. Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes down to Adventures League and you have like official builds, the idea was that you give these bonuses to people so that the builds start to trend in a certain direction, right?
Right.
It turns out that was like pretty much the rule, and not like, it was a rule, not a guideline. And so.
Right. Yeah. Because they have discussed, and I have observed that those stat bonuses have an outsized effect on character creation builds, right? That was that was unintended. And so
it was intended to push people towards that direction without outright saying it, but it was just as good as outright saying elves are wizards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they're
largely, not entirely, but for a large proportion of players.
Yeah, and so they're cutting back on that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of stuff where it's like the rules as they were written are fine as a game, but we've evolved 5e to something beyond that. If it was just a wargaming scenario, that would be perfectly fine. That's like, nobody would argue with those stats if it was just a wargaming game, the way it used to be. But it's not anymore. Now it's almost like a society simulator. And because of that, there's a little bit of like anthropology that we're going to want to ease up on and kind of not make too many assumptions about how your race is primarily where you get most of your traits, because your environment does too. And so therefore those stats got moved to a different area. So it's not that the mechanics are bad, it's that they were problematic for what the game had become and evolved into.
Mm-hmm. So they're just changing the places that those come in at, basically.
Yeah, because the balance is still basically the same.
Right.
It's just that now that +1 and +2 that you would get from your race is now just moved to general character creation. You just get one, regardless of what race you pick, right?
Right. Well, different races had different amounts too. I wonder if they're going to keep that, or if it's all going to be either +1 and +2. Or
I think the general one is +1 +2. Oh, no. I think what they say is +1 +2 or +1 +1 +1.
Right. Okay, I guess that works.
But I don't know if humans, because humans are freaking overpowered because they were boring. I don't know if humans are going to have something special with that stuff, because they got +1 across the board, which is huge.
Yeah, kind of huge.
It's kind of huge.
Well, I'm sure that there's still going to be racial traits, right? Like in terms of racial ability. So they still do have opportunity to add stuff like that if a specific race has versatile advantages of the sort. They could just say you get a few extra ability score increases from your race in addition to the default ones.
So one of their design principles that they were going off of for this new 5e, new 5e, right?
Yeah,
is
practically 6e.
practically 6e. Jeremy Crawford was saying in an extended interview on the UA that came out, he was saying, we wanted to make these races feel like, what did he say? Like the most that race of that race is like the elviest elves, right? They wanted their elves to feel like not just any elves, but the elviest elves. So now there's a lot more stuff that they're going to be adding to racial features. Like, it's not that you have like let's say dwarves with stone cutting. It's not just that, yeah, you have a cultural history for a cultural affinity towards stone, but because of that, you now actually have mechanical bonuses as well that feed into it. So now you feel even more like a dwarf. So now stone cutting, you can once per day get tremor sense.
I see.
Or something like that.
And I think they're getting, I think that's part of like what some of the changes they made to the Ranger were as well.
Yeah.
Over time, which is this idea of making stuff that's basically more mechanically beneficial. Because they did have a lot of vestigial mechanics that were not really that useful in practice just because of the way people play the game, but that were more like role play heavy.
Flavorful.
Yeah, flavorful. And it's like that, those kinds of features are great if your system is designed around it, right? And we've seen that in other systems, but it's clear and has generally been clear for a long time that that's not what D&D is designed to do. D&D is very much a pulpy hack and slash, swords and sorcery kind of adventure. It is not the kind of social simulator that, say, Vampire is, right? It is, and so those features inevitably got kind of sidelined by players over its history. So because of that, like now you've got dwarves that have like these vestigial limb, mechanics that nobody really uses. So
like you have a bonus to like looking at rocks. Fantastic. When am I going to do that?
Yeah, that's a very first edition kind of mechanic when you think about it.
It is a very first edition. Well, that's where it comes from, because the lineage of stone cutting is...
Yeah, it comes from that player versus dungeon master dynamic.
Yeah, but like Matt Colville, I believe it was Matt Colville, looked into it because the idea was... Yeah, it was dungeon master versus players, right? The idea was in the first editions of D&D was the dungeon master had a dungeon. That's why they're called dungeon masters. A dungeon. It was very board gamey, right?
Mm-hmm.
You go to a place, you go to someone's house and say, hey, I want to play your dungeon. And then you pull out your miniatures and then you play the game. And that was the whole game. And so you would have dungeon masters who would throw in like these little twists to the dungeon.
Yeah, they're gotchas.
Yeah, little gotchas. Like, you've been going on this 50-foot long straightaway, but you didn't know that it was at like a 0.5 degree decline. So now you're suddenly in the second level of the dungeon. Even though you didn't want to be, you're now in the second level. And because you're in the second level, everything's harder.
Yeah.
It was like a gotcha moment. And it was like, okay, how often did that actually happen? Because there are rules that dwarves can detect that kind of stuff, right? They can detect inclines in the stone. Like they can detect stonework and they can detect hidden passages and stuff like that. That was all fine. But it's like, how often did a DM actually do that? And if it's assumed that the DM is going to do that, surely it would be in the official games, right? Like if Gary Gygax did that in his games, then that would show up in official released adventures. It showed up one time in an adventure where there was an incline in the stonework. And so that one time in an official rule, if you played the official game, your dwarf would have an ability that worked once. If you had a dwarf in that party in that game, and if you remember that you have it.
Well, to be fair, non-humans in general were not very incentivized to play back then. But yeah, still, it's one of those vestigial limbs that's still kind of around.
And it's like, now, even when it was first invented, it was still very vestigial. It was still very just like,
just a product of its culture.
This is purely flavorful, but we're going to pretend that it has a mechanical benefit.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the thing. I mean, well, obviously that came up, I guess, often enough in people's games, apparently, of that, again, because of that player versus DM dynamic, that there would just be like random, just screw you over stuff like that. That some of these mechanics probably help to address. But yeah, that stuff is not really a whole lot of use for it nowadays.
But still, that's the purpose of classes, though.
Right, yeah, exactly. That's the purpose of classes, not races, in terms of the design of the game. At least, especially as it is now. So, yeah, I get all that. But it's like, And I kind of like that they're solidifying all that, because a lot of that has been in flux for some time. So I'm just like looking for a new meta to kind of set that in, so that we could all be on the same page again, instead of having to flip through like 3 different source books to try and explain to new players how to build their character. So
the biggest thing that they're doing is kind of centralizing everything, because now they've acquired D&D Beyond. So now there's one place that you can go to that'll have all the information, right? Because that's like D&D Beyond, just a resource that they can continuously update.
Now they're making it so that you get digital copies with all your physical purchases too. Finally, which they should have been doing ages ago.
I'm finally incentivized to use D&D Beyond.
Yeah, and also like other companies have been doing that just with PDFs for a long time, and so
that's a problem. Is that D&D is old? It's really freaking old, and there's just tradition that they have to kind of like keep up with the image of D&D, right? Lots of new companies are coming out and they're like, we didn't have to keep up with these traditions. We don't have to have only physical copies. Yeah, we're going to release ours digitally. Buy it on
DM's Guild.
Yeah.
And well, then, I mean, like even so, like
just like have an update.
Like digital copies or physical copies coming with digital copies is a thing that I've seen in a lot of other RPGs. It's just a standard in some parts of the industry.
It should just be a standard. Having a digital copy and having it be easily accessible to updates should be the standard.
Yeah.
A physical copy is a collector's item. It shouldn't be the compendium.
Yeah, exactly. That's just not the way the world works anymore, which is like crazy that it took this long for Wizards to catch up with that. I mean, it's been a standard. I think it was a standard in comic books before it was, for true. Wizard source books. So anyway, that's a little ranty aside, but still, like, there's definitely a lot of changes. And I just that's what kind of put me off a little bit, is just the sheer extent of the amount of changes for saying it's still going to be 5e, right? Like, it feels like they should just come and outright say that this is at least a 5.5e, but it seems in practice that that's what it's going to be. But they have said that it's all going to be backwards compatible, like all the adventures and stuff are still going to work, which means the base mechanics are likely still the same, even though it seems they are changing a lot of little stuff.
That's the thing. I think the primary thing that they're when it comes to the mechanics being the same, I think it's just that like they're keeping with the SRD base D20 system. The classes are going to change, the races are going to change, a lot of the actual like way you use the SRD is going to change, but it's still going to be D20 for everything, and then classes D12 through 6, such and so on and so forth. But they're remixing all of the stuff to better suit how the game is actually played today. I would say today, but it's releasing in 2024. So 2024.
Yeah, we'll see.
And again, this is all playtest. So they're releasing these to kind of test the waters. We don't even know if these will make it into the final game. Like, we don't even know if they have any intentions of making these final. This could just be stuff that they're like, hey, are you guys acceptable with these kind of changes? And then maybe just keeping it how it was, right? Because it could just be, everybody has your reaction of just, I don't like it. And then they go, fair, as it was.
Exactly.
And, right. That could just be how it goes.
That's true. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, they tend to have pretty good playtesting regimens. And that's the thing, is base 5e, right? With, what was it, D&D Next that they called it at first? That was
Project D&D Next or whatever.
That
codename D&D Next.
That was very thoroughly play tested, and I think that's part of what contributed to the strengths of 5th edition in general. Was that it was very thoroughly play tested before they ever launched it. And so I think that's the reason why 5e's design was so solid and so curated by its launch, right? Like, it is probably the most solid version of this game that has existed to date. In terms of game design, right? Just in terms of design. There's lots of reasons to prefer some of the other editions, but I think like this was the most thoroughly designed.
Well, if you want to talk about thorough, I think this is the most efficiently designed.
That's fair.
Thoroughly designed is 3.5.
That's true. Thorough has a different connotation, but yeah, you know what I mean, though.
Yeah, most efficiently. It is definitely the most efficient when it comes to rules to game to table.
Yeah, exactly. Getting you into the game as quick as possible, with as few boundaries as possible. Yeah, and especially with as few barriers to entry as well. Like, this is hands down one of the most accessible versions of the game. So
yeah,
and
for sure,
I think they've kind of acknowledged that that's the part of the reason for their success, and so it seems they're priming to do a similar level of playtesting for this update. So hopefully that means
it's looking that way.
Yeah, that they're gonna, because we're still very, very early. It's hard to formulate too much of an opinion when we only have playtest material so far. So
and just the one,
and just
that came out like a couple weeks ago,
and just the one at that. So it's yeah, so it's still early to tell a lot of things. But if they're going to playtest it that thoroughly, I think we could have some confidence that if they playtest as thoroughly as they did for D&D Next, which became 5e, that we're going to see a similar level of refinement in what it actually launches at.
I remember seeing, I think it was some kind of presentation, like once D&D, I think once 5th edition had already launched, there was some sort of presentation by some of the designers talking about how they got to that point. Or maybe this was still during the process of D&D Next, I'm not sure. But talking about how they gathered all the data with all the playtesting material and just the sheer quantity of data that they had, and then like compiling it and figuring out like what they liked and what people liked, what people didn't like. The spreadsheets that they had were fantastic, because I love spreadsheets. The spreadsheets that they had were great. And that was 10 years ago for gathering the data and compiling it and analyzing it and turning it into a completed project. I'm hoping that 10 years later, it's going to be even better of compiling, gathering, getting information about how people play the game out of all this data. I'm hoping that we're going to get something that much, much more closely, I was going to say that much more closely parallels how people play the game, but people play the game so many different ways. I think there might be a problem where it's a lot of conflicting data of just like, oh yeah, we have like, half the population plays the game one way, half of it plays the other. So how do we pick between these two different kinds of things? I'm wondering if that's going to happen, because it's just huge now. But I think there are going to be a lot of ways that it's just like, there's a lot of consensus about like, this is just bad, this needs to be improved. Or not just bad, but like, this could be better, this is how we can improve it. Like when Tasha's rules for pulling out the ability modifier from the races, everyone immediately went like, this is better at the very least, this is like just better. I'm hoping we're gonna get a game that keeps the most people happy.
Right
Yeah, there's obviously gonna be a lot of compromise, because you can't make everybody happy.
Right.
But I'm hoping that the game that they get, because the game that we got before with D&D Next 10 years ago was, pretty darn good. If they do that again, putting that game through another fine sieve mesh of data analysis and game design, it has to be better, right?
Yeah.
It just has to be.
Well, we'll see if they could do it again. It could be the lightning only strikes once in that place. But yeah. I have hopes, but we'll see. Time will tell. Could be they completely ruin it, and then everyone will go back to playing regular 5e.
Yeah, kind of like Pathfinder 2.
Right.
We revamped all of Pathfinder 2. It's much better now, and everyone goes, yeah, I'm just going to stick with Pathfinder 1, thanks.
Well, that's the thing about, I think, the tabletop medium that I think has a culture for it more so than video games, is the idea of just being able to use your system of preference, right? Like people regularly go backwards in editions, just because of preference.
Yeah.
Like that's just the thing people do, right? Just because there is a Pathfinder 2 does not mean that everyone's necessarily playing that one, right? And because of the fact, I guess, being outside of a digital medium, there's less of this sense of forward momentum of constant software updates or things like that, of patches and whatnot, or support or server shutting down. You don't have to worry about any of that. It's just like, once that rule set is out there, it's out there, and you can play whatever the heck you want.
Yeah. I was actually going to say, that brings up a good point, because digital products that come out, not even digital, but just like computer products, like stuff that came out on discs, right? There are people who play older versions of games because patches have fixed or broken certain parts of games, especially like speedrunners. Speedrunners will like purchase old versions of like discs or cartridges because they need the original, stuff. Because like, oh yeah, the build, the system that was used in this is better for my my use. Everybody wants it, but like it's so much easier in tabletop because it's not continuously updated and all this other stuff. Like people will, even like with Steam, I think you can do this where you have to go offline and then purchase like an older version of the game so that it doesn't auto update.
Right.
It's like the lengths people go to be able to do what tabletop inherently has for its benefit is just like, it just shows that like having options is, people like having options.
Yeah. Because there's always going to be different strokes for different folks. And people have, like you said, there are so many different ways that people play every game that you can't account for everything. And so different people can have different preferences for different editions. And so, yeah, I'm just curious. I think the thing that's most curious about it is that this is the first really generational change of an edition for a major RPG that I play. That, it'll be my first time where I have to form that opinion, where there are people who have been forming that opinion for generations, So, yeah, I'll be curious how that goes over for me.
Do you think you're going to become a 5th edition grognard?
I might.
Nah, 5th edition. I've been playing that for decades. Now I'm never going to play these new games. These new games it's all woke. It's all woke, and I'm never going to use it.
It could be. I mean, there is a bit of an emphasis they placed in that featurette of playing like self-insert characters, which I thought was kind of funny. Where it was just like, I think there's an entire crowd that appeals to. I do worry that it's going to encourage a lot of toxic player behavior, but to each their own table. We definitely know some people who get a big kick out of playing self-insert characters.
But that's the thing. That's the default, right? Because I talk about this all the time. But by default, PCs, no, not PCs, players who play D&D or players who do role-playing, by default, they are all psychopaths. The definition of a psychopath is the inability to feel empathy towards other people, right? Or the inability to put yourself in a position to experience something that someone else has experienced. By default, that is what a player is. You go to a game and you're like, oh yeah, look at all these little minis and all this other stuff. Like, oh, that's a stat block. It's like, no. I'm trying to explain to you that that's a human being that you're, or an elf, or some thinking intelligent creature that has feelings and emotions and a family history and all this other stuff. And you're looking at it like it's XP. Everybody, when they first start out, is a psychopath. It takes a while to come out of that and learn empathy and go like, oh yeah, I should start to treat the NPCs like people, and then I can have a more fulfilling game experience. But the default is that.
Right.
And most people
that's why
don't ever come out of that or don't want to come out of that.
That's why you get to murder hoboism.
That's the fast track to murder hobo. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, it's very difficult to first of all, it's very difficult to feel empathy. Not only in like real
life. Very difficult to teach empathy.
It's very difficult to teach empathy. Not only in real life, but like now imagine like it actually being not a real person.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's fair. Because now, it is just, graph paper and stat blocks and miniatures. You have that layer of removal where you have to inherently buy into it first.
Yeah.
And so you can choose not to.
Yeah, you can choose not to. And that's not saying that that's wrong. It's just that that's the default. Yeah. And there's...
Or at least you can choose not to without getting arrested.
Ooh, that's also a big fantasy as well. That is a bad thing. That you do not play. do not fulfill sociopathic, like, sadistic tendencies in role-playing games because you want to do that and it's an outlet. That's not... you should probably talk to somebody about that. But that is a thing that people do as well.
Yeah.
However, so that's the default. So when you default to that, giving this what amounts to set of numbers a personality and imagining that it has feelings outside of your own is extremely difficult. You know whose feelings and stuff like that you do understand very well? Yourself. Creating a character that is just you with pointy ears is gonna be the majority of characters.
Yeah. I guess so.
There's a dog.
I can hear that. But all right, well, we're running out of time, so let's do some rapid fire topics real quick. Well, first off, speaking of D&D, we never talked about the Lost episode. before we're coming to a close here. But we should probably acknowledge that there was an episode of this podcast that was never published, not for any controversial reasons, because we talk about a lot of controversial stuff, but because we lost some files. So
yeah,
it sadly was never published, because I think it was probably one of the best episodes we recorded. I'm just going to throw that out there just so people can think about that.
it might have been. Well, because it has a lot of the stuff that we were talking about in one of our previous episodes when it comes to just like our philosophy and worldview and just how we view art.
And also just a lot of great topics.
Like that.
A lot of great topics. Because we talked about, because I was going to say, speaking of D&D, we talked about the Jamie Stone and Satine Phoenix controversy.
Right. Yeah.
So I told you about that and got your raw take on that. So that's lost. I also told you, I also got your raw reaction to the Avatar movies, because you're a big Avatar The Last Airbender fan, and
that's right.
Big
that
Avatar
was as well.
Yeah. And so we actually, for those wondering, we did talk about that. Don't have that episode that got lost, that has gotten lost to the metaverse. It is not something that will see the light of day, but I did tell you about those because you hadn't heard the news, and I told you what the slate of Avatar movies were going to be, the animated movies, and you got your raw reaction to all of that. So sadly, that is gone. But most importantly, we did our first ever and only impromptu Did You Know segment, which was on virtual production. And so we'll have to to redo that one at some point, because we have a lot of things to say about virtual production, and I think it would just be a generally good conversation to have. To be fair, we've had versions of that conversation many times before. So just presenting virtual production as if to somebody who has never heard of it is just going to be something I think that we could pretty easily recreate. But
very easily. And also, like, I actually have a full presentation ready to go for it.
That is true.
Because I had to construct something like that for something a little while ago. So I have all that information just at my fingertips if I need it.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think what we will miss, though, is that it was so spontaneous when it happened in that one.
Yeah.
And it was very natural that we kind of transitioned into talking about that, which was super cool for, like I said, only impromptu Did You Know segment, but we lost it. Dang it.
Now, and it's entirely my fault too. Like, it's like not to assign blame or anything, but it was my fault. You misplaced that file somewhere. I still don't know what happened to it. I can't even fathom what might have happened. I genuinely don't know, because we do 2 episode recordings, and I think that was the first one of the group.
No, you might have recorded over it like a tape.
That's the thing. Every single time I'm closing out of the track, it's like, are you sure you want to do that? You can't get it back. And I get struck with this pang of anxiety, because I think the thing that happened is going to happen.
It's true. Yeah, so I always got to double check now.
Yeah.
Okay, one thing I want to talk about, I think I'll try to keep this brief. Like I said, these are part of rapid fire topics. Is because you were asking me questions about this concept of the exhausted majority earlier. That was on our topics list, and you weren't sure what that was. And
yeah, I've never heard of that before.
This is something that a piece of vocabulary that I've come into recently that I'm like, that's actually very useful for conversations that we have frequently. So this will help streamline our conversations even more.
Even more. Yes, because we need to be more efficient.
Yes, we need more shorthands. Because this is something we actually have talked about before, and it very much relates to a lot of bless you, a lot of the topics that we talk about. So this is kind of bringing us into the political arena here.
All right.
So, Loryn, you've probably noticed that there's polarization happening.
What?
Yeah, you might have heard about this on the news. Actually, you might not have. That's the problem.
I don't watch the
news. But yeah, the issue is there's a lot of extreme polarization happening because of information echo chambers and media silos and things of that nature, and also just cultural and geographical silos. And the thing that most people might not necessarily realize, because of the way information circulates now, is the fact that those extremes don't represent everybody. And we've talked about how there have been a number of places, especially in journalism currently, there's this trend of the people in the middle who are kind of gaining curiosity about the other side and who are kind of meeting each other and finding each other right now intellectually. And it's been really interesting to see that play out. And at first I was kind of fascinated by it because I was like, wow, that seems so antithetical to where our culture is now. But it turns out it's not necessarily antithetical to where the world actually is. It's just antithetical to what's portrayed in the media, right? So the exhausted majority was this term, I believe it was coined by a study. I'll see if I could locate the study and put it in the show notes. But it basically discerned that there is a demographic that represents almost 2/3 of Americans.
Wow.
Yeah, about 70%, I think it's close to. So more than 2/3, actually. If it's, I think it was close to 70%. More than 2/3 of Americans.
Somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4.
Yeah, exist in this ideological zone that has been dubbed the exhausted majority. And basically that is your people in the middle, the people who don't fit into those extremes. And however, the problem is that the exhausted majority is right now the least politically engaged.
Yeah.
And because, well, it's in the name. They're exhausted, right? Like they see all this stuff and it's just like, this just sucks. Everything sucks right now. The people to my left suck. The people to my right suck. Everything sucks. I give up.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, and of course, that's a generalism. They're not all politically disengaged. And I think we would solidly fall into that ideological middle ground without necessarily being disengaged. But the issue is it's hard to mobilize people who don't feel like they have a place in. I think really what it comes down to is the voting booth. Is like they don't have a place in the party system, and they feel their options are limited, especially if you're thinking from a pragmatic perspective of trying to get people elected. Then oftentimes they'll just default into voting along party lines in whatever way is closest to them, but does not represent them, strictly speaking. Yeah. And so
that's actually a really interesting, what do you call that, side product of party voting, of having also just like the way that our voting system is set up, is that the majority of people, like
first past the post.
Yeah, first past the post, but like the majority of people engage in what is called strategic voting. And strategic voting is not voting to what you want. It's voting for what's the closest to what you want. It's like, because it's like what most people actually want aren't the options that are given, right? And you're talking about like this exhausted majority of people who don't have any, or who don't fall under those like political extremes, which pretty much everything is now. Like you're like the Republicans are very Republican now, and like the Democrats are very Democratic, or they're not Democratic, they're
very progressive, we'll say.
Progressive or whatever, right? Yeah. So it's like the people in the middle are just like, I don't really want to vote for either of these two options. Yeah. So if I have to vote, I have to vote strategically. I have to vote for the people who I think will create legislation that is close to what I want.
That I think will win and create legislation that is close to what I want.
Exactly. Yeah. And because of that strategic voting, you have people who are just like, I guess exhausted is the only word, of just saying like, I'm tired of making compromises. And I just want what I want.
Yeah. Well, I think it's not even just that like Republicans are very Republican and Democrats are very progressive. It's that like the identities of these things are changing too. And they've changed a lot just in this past decade, right? Like the Republican Party has become an almost fundamentally different thing. Well, arguably, I guess some, I think, would make the argument that it is becoming what it's been the whole time. But I think that it's, in terms of conservative values, right? There's this trend towards illiberalism, and I'm talking about. No, I'm not talking about political liberalism. I'm talking about classical liberalism, right? In terms of political philosophy. So classical liberalism would be basically the ideas of individual freedom that the United States was essentially founded on, right? So generally speaking, most people understand classical liberalism to be a good thing, because individual freedom is essentially the prime object of it. And so basically all of the United States and a lot of other free nations have their kind of founding documents based in this political philosophy. And on both sides of the aisle, we're seeing this trend towards illiberalism, right? Which is individual freedoms and specifically anti-pluralism, right? Like the idea of basically anti-pluralism, right? Insofar as like, okay, both worldviews, both ideological camps cannot coexist, therefore one must dominate the other.
Right.
And so and you're seeing a trend towards that on both sides, and that's where a lot of this polarization either comes from or is a result of. And so it's a chicken and egg situation. But the thing is, because of that, right, that trend, you're seeing, again, some fundamental identity shifts in a lot of the party dynamics, where it is about, destroying the other side. I remember hearing David French once put it like this, where we're in this sort of weird zone right now where every party's best asset is the other party, right? Yeah. That's the thing that they use to mobilize people now, is just look what they're doing, evil and horrible these other people are, right? Like, you don't want that. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you want me, you don't want that.
Yeah, you don't want that, so vote for this.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Like, that's just such a weird predicament to be in, but that's literally how the rhetoric is moving.
Yeah.
And so there's this huge trend towards liberalism. Like, I think, to name a specific example, like you look at the Ron DeSantis stuff, right? Like, a lot of the things he's been doing with like speech control legislation is like highly anti-conservative values. But now it's passing as conservative because that's where the party's at, right? Its identity is changing to something that's loyalistic to something that it didn't used to be, or at least it didn't say it used to be. And same thing on the more progressive end of the scale, right? The identity is changed in far more extreme ways than it would have been like just within our lifetime, within our like a decade, even less. And so, obviously the rise of stuff like, cancel culture and things like that, you're seeing, again, that illiberalistic tendency, this desire to not share space with people who disagree with you.
Yeah. And like that is, as a cultural phenomenon, it's very strange to me, because like I genuinely don't understand it. I remember there's something that happened recently where somebody, some company, right, a business, a money-making machine, made a decision that made a bunch of people angry, and it's just like, I think it was some burger joint was making like a veggie patty or something like that, right? And a bunch of people were like, "Oh, I'm never gonna eat at this place again because like they're going woke," and it's like, your option's still on the menu.
Like, right? Yeah,
your stuff is still there. It's just that this whole new group of people are now going to be able to eat here. Is that a bad thing? Like, it's very much, it's anti, not pro, right? It's anti whatever it is that you don't like. It's not pro your set of beliefs. It's anti these other people's beliefs. And because of that, there is no world where those two, in these people's minds, there is no world where those two things can coexist. Where if you had pro your beliefs, then even if somebody else came in with have this complete different worldview, but also have aspects that share your belief system, there's room for that to coexist, but not if you are anti whatever it is that these other people are. That cannot exist. It's not that you're for something, it's that you're against something. That's not a way to live.
Right.
It's not a way to form a society.
Yeah, defining yourself by what you're against. It just doesn't work. And the polling data on this is terrifying too, right? Like that's why there's all of a sudden like very real talk of, say, secession or a fracturing of a republic in other senses, right? Or even like civil war, like things like that get tossed around now, ideas like that as predictions, because of the fact that things like the polling data is reflecting that more and more people on either extreme are answering the question of like, essentially, can your views coexist, right, in a governed society with people of other views, and less, or more and more rather, people are answering that in the negative and saying, or at least talking about American politics specifically, that's where we're kind of getting at here. This is where the exhausted majority comes in, is, and not to say some of these trends aren't happening elsewhere, but that's just what we're referring to in specific, is the more and more Americans are answering that negatively, of not believing that their worldviews can essentially coexist with people of opposing worldviews, which is an issue because that's essentially what our republic was founded on, right? That is classical liberalism, is the idea that we can coexist from different worldviews with different desires, and compromises can be made. But there's, again, this is part of a larger trend towards illiberalism in the classical sense of the term. And that's kind of terrifying. But the fact that I'm terrified of that puts me in the same spot as, it turns out, a majority of people, as much as 70%. Yeah. So that's what the exhausted majority is. And the difficulty now is essentially in finding a way to mobilize everybody in the exhausted majority, because they exist. Like, a lot of people are sick and tired of what is happening right now. It's just a matter of just figuring out how to create a system that can capitalize on that. I have heard some states have actually implemented some form of ranked voting system. And so that's fantastic. Yeah, like I think it's in places like Alaska and stuff, though. Right? Where it's just like
that's not fantastic.
yeah. That's the place where
a little less fantastic.
Those are the places where you can experiment, though. You're allowed to.
Yeah, because I mean, no offense, Alaska, but it's like, it doesn't really matter.
Wow,
your population is so low.
Get wrecked.
Australia here has a ranked voting system.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, I don't know the details, but I understand.
Although everyone is forced to vote, and I don't like that.
I understand there is some measure of ranked voting in some places now in the States. I don't know to what extent, or if it's just for specific kinds of elections or things like that, but I have heard some discourse around that.
It might just be like local stuff, because I don't think you can do that for generals.
Yeah, probably not. Not for sending somebody to DC or something like that. But so anyway, the exhausted majority, that is a useful term that I've found very helpful for the kinds of discussions that we tend to have. So now you know it too, and now our conversations will grow more efficient. You're welcome.
Very much so. That is a super useful term. Correct. I like it.
Yeah. Also, well, very brief note. I'll try to rapid fire this as much as we can. Have you heard about this third party that's come up?
Which one?
It's called Forward.
It's called Forward?
Yeah, not the catchiest name, but I get what they're going for.
I know it. Yeah. It doesn't.
It doesn't.
Beginning of a book or something.
No. Yeah, like I said, I get what they're going for, but it's definitely. What would you say? It's definitely a little cumbersome. It doesn't necessarily roll off the tongue, I think. But I think. Right. But yeah, it's a new centrist third party that just got founded in recent weeks, and.
Really?
Yeah. It's
that recent.
Yeah, wow. That recent. And it's fascinating because, as some analysts have pointed out, because of things like the exhausted majority, now very apparently existing, there's kind of been no better time for a substantial third party to show up if it can mobilize that 70%. Right? Basically, the challenge is to convince enough people that their candidate has a high enough chance of winning anything, right? That's essentially what the challenge is, because of the fact that we use first past the post voting.
Yeah, because with our current system is not good. But with first past the post, it's basically you have to convince them that you can win. Not even that you can get close, that you can win.
Exactly.
It's pretty much got to be a guarantee.
Yeah.
And it's insanely hard to do if you just starting as a political force. Yeah,
that's a high bar to pass for basically the only bar that you have.
Yeah, because anything less than 50% and 51%.
Right, yeah.
Anything less than that is 100% failure.
Yeah, which is an unfortunate product of the way our voting system works. But yeah, it's the reason I'm kind of fascinated by it, though, is the fact that we have several non two-party options. We have the Green Party, the Libertarians, all that.
Yeah,
but this is probably the only one that if it plays its cards right, that I've seen, has a chance to become a considerable political force just by virtue of the kind of names that are on board with it. Because it was founded, first off, the kind of like the two principal founders, one of them is Andrew Yang, who is you might remember him. He was a Democratic presidential candidate in the 2020 elections. So
yes,
he was, straight up socialist. He's he is one of the founding members of that, and alongside a Republican former governor, I think, something like that. So it's like immediately, you've got two.
That's left and right, like actually left and right.
Yeah, exactly. Not you have actual left and right. Two people who are like winners, right? Who have operated at a high level of political game. And well, maybe not necessarily like strictly winners, but like presidential candidate is a pretty high bar to get to anyway.
Yeah.
Right. Like even if you didn't win that, and he has a lot of experience there, but like in their network that they kind of bring with them to start to form this is probably just going to start giving place to, say, all the never Trumper Republicans that are getting pushed out of office right now, right? And all of the Democrats who are, not interested in the fervor and cancel culture and all of that of the sort of the opposite extreme of populist rhetoric that's going on over there, right? Like now all of a sudden there might be a refuge for those kinds of politicians who would otherwise get kind of eked out. So we'll see how it does. I just think that's a curiosity, at least for now. Time will tell, but from what I understand, they launched with like a solid amount of funding and are looking to see if they could have a presidential candidate for the 2024 election.
That's actually kind of impressive.
Yeah.
I would say, that's pretty soon. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to get that far simply because of the momentum they would need to even begin to like be taken seriously as a presidential candidate option.
But again, time will tell.
But that is a recipe for success.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Because if ever there was a time where it would work, that time is now. That's the only reason for optimism, right? Is that this is the prime moment for something like this to work if they play their cards right. So again, time will tell. But for right now, that's at least a curiosity that I think we could keep an eye on.
For sure. Options are good.
Solid wisdom. So this episode has gone a little long, but I think we could go a little longer because we're going to talk about, we're going to point out that this is actually a bit of a finale of sorts. And let's talk about that. So we have decided that essentially with our hectic schedules and with how busy we are, we didn't necessarily start out with this intention, but we have decided it is for the best that we run this podcast in seasons. So this is going to be the season finale for our first season. We're going to run it as a 24 episode run to start with, and we'll probably be coming back to it sometime early next year, ideally.
Yeah.
So, let's unpack that a bit though, because I don't want to just leave it at that. This isn't just a mere logistical scheduling note because we can't do anything without overthinking it and give it some philosophical basis here because. Well, first off, I think there's a lot of lessons learned here, and I'm kind of impressed that we managed to pull off a podcast at all. Like the upstart is the hardest
just going
part.
Into it.
Yeah, the upstart is the hardest part.
Just dropping into it.
Yeah, of getting everything set up with your RSS feeds and all that, and all the distribution methods. It's definitely a new world that I'm glad I've dipped my toes into. And now that we have our toes in it, it's actually we have the infrastructure to be able to do more stuff like this, which I'm really excited about because I'm coming to find that I love audio as a medium and I want to do more stuff with that. I have a lot of ideas of what to do with that.
But yeah, I have an idea for a podcast that I want to run as soon as this one's all wrapped up and I'll have more time. I might be able to start working on it.
Yeah, maybe.
And and that's a cool thing because we already did everything for this podcast. It's like it's a really cool system of just like you set everything up, and once we have it set up, all we have to do is just continue to add things to it. So this new podcast, it doesn't require any of that initial setup. We can just get going and just start running.
Exactly. That's what's kind of cool about it. And what I'm coming to love about the whole system of how podcasts work is once you have that infrastructure in place, then it becomes very modular. And all you need is an RSS feed to plug in. But anyway, we didn't come here to talk about the technical side. We're here to talk about the principles.
Yes.
So yeah, we're taking a bit of a hiatus, and we've decided that's for the best. And I think there's definitely a lot of valuable lessons learned here, even besides the technical and production aspects. Is that, like, for example, the fact that I think we're at a point in our lives now where we're kind of getting a bit more perspective on how we want to sort of shape our career paths, respectively.
Yeah.
And I think what I've kind of come to realize, and maybe you could speak for yourself afterwards, is like I'm at a point in my life now where, first off, I have been working full time for several years now, in addition to doing all creative work and online content and all that.
Yeah.
And that definitely takes a pretty hefty toll. It's a lot of work, but I love doing it. But the thing is, I'm starting to realize that it requires prioritization just because I am a finite human being that has limited time. And so
it's a problem.
It is a problem. And I've kind of had to ask the question of, like, what am I more interested in? And what do I want my legacy to be, essentially? Right? Do I want to be remembered as a content creator that, you know, maybe made films or, you know, other art projects on the side? Or do I want to be an artist who happens to have a YouTube channel? I've kind of decided that the latter sounds more appealing to me. And I've talked about this. I think you could read my blog post titled Moving Forward on our website that kind of delves into, I think, the mindset I used to have a little bit. And we've talked about it here on the podcast too, and some of our own creative journey of how, like, I very much was interested at one time in my life in pursuing the content creator lifestyle. But as I've kind of grown and matured as a creator, I've come to realize that that's not really what I want out of it. I'm not necessarily looking for a career, although I want one. I'm looking for, like, creating and telling stories that are meaningful and impactful is just something that I have to do. It's something that I feel called to do. And even at a deeper spiritual level, because art is powerful and it moves people and changes the world in ways that's almost that is more powerful than pure rhetoric. And so, yeah, that being the case, yeah, I've kind of realized that, like, with my limited time outside of my full-time job, it's very difficult to focus on more than one project at a time. And at least if I do, you know, then some aspects of each of them suffer. And so, yeah, we were
just because of our limited time.
Yeah, just because of limited time, right? Not because of any lack of effort. So I think at this point, from this point onward, I'm probably, because we've gotten a lot of practice. We've talked about this, right? We've done a lot of smaller projects. We've refined our craft in a number of ways with regards to film, with regards to editing and audio engineering, with regards to writing, especially for me. I've definitely grown a lot as a writer over the years from where I used to be. And we just haven't had a chance to dedicate ourselves to larger works that really showcase where we're at creatively. And so I've kind of decided that it's like, for what I do on this broader online work, I think it'd be more profitable to, at least, you know, creatively, artistically, it would be more profitable to focus on those major works rather than spreading myself thin with a bunch of smaller works that I know I can get done, but are not going to really showcase where I'm at in my craft. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, we've been wrapping up a number of projects lately, right? As we speak, Resident Roleplay Prometheus is about to wrap up. And now this, the season of this podcast. And so with that freed up time, first off, I just need a bit of a sabbatical. I've come to accept the fact that I probably need one. And that, I think, it leads to larger conversations about the nature of breaks in general. I think it's ultimately healthy to have that. And obviously at a scientific level, like, studies have shown that you kind of need that. But even at a spiritual level, like, there's an entire theology of Sabbath that's built into my worldview that I feel I've never done a sufficient job of observing outside of like Sunday, right? Like I've been pretty strict about keeping, Sunday as like an off day for me, but like the principle of Sabbath goes beyond that, right?
Exactly.
And a podcast I listened to, the Good Faith podcast with David French and Curtis Chang, they actually did a recent episode on Sabbath because Curtis took a sabbatical from the podcast and David French never let him hear the end of it. But it was just like, all right, I'm alone now. I have to work for a living. But yeah, when he came back, they had this larger conversation about the nature of Sabbath and of sabbatical, and especially the difference between sabbatical and vacation. And that's something I hadn't actually considered much before, right? Those are different things. Sabbath is for rest. Vacation is for fun, is for leisure.
Yeah.
And the thing is, as they pointed out, I was like, I never thought about it this way before, but vacations aren't relaxing, generally speaking. You know what I mean? Like, they're a lot of work to set up a vacation, and they become their own stressor in a way because you got to save up money for it. You got to take out the time for it. You got to do all this logistical organization. And then even when you're on the vacation, you're under the pressure of, okay, is this enough fun, right? For how much work I put into setting this up. Right. So vacation.
I gotta do all this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I have to do all this stuff. I have to run around, hit all these attractions. It's not. Vacations are designed for fun, which ironically isn't always a low stress thing to do. And so
it's work. It's a lot of work to have fun. I've come to find out.
Yeah, it's a lot of work to find out, or to have fun.
Yeah. Like when you're a kid, all the work to having fun is done by your parents. When you're an adult, it all falls on you.
Yeah, exactly.
Fun just doesn't come out of nowhere. Like you got to plan that stuff.
Yeah. So there is a distinct difference between vacation and sabbatical. And I actually think for the first time in my adult life, I do have some opportunities for what I would consider vacation coming up here. But I think Sabbath and sabbatical is another thing that I think deserves greater attention, because at a theological level, what it's about and how this theme is woven into scripture is not just about taking a break, but being, as Curtis Chang put it in that particular podcast I was referring to, being content with incompleteness, right? Yeah. And this idea of, okay, it's not about getting everything squared away and being finished with everything and then being like, okay, now I can stop and rest, but rather being content with leaving things open-ended and being like, I don't have to have that control because we believe in a God that's in control, right? That's the nature of my worldview, is it doesn't all depend on me. And so because of that fact, I can be content and at peace even with a stack of papers waiting for me, even with a lot of incompleted projects still on the back burner. I can stop even with that still there, and everything will be okay. And that's a huge step of trust and of faith, really. Well, which is the root word that faith even comes from, is trust. So,
really?
Yeah. Their linguistic roots are their linguistic roots are basically identical. So, and that's the idea, right? That's the idea behind, at least at a theological level, this idea of Sabbath. So that's something I feel I needed to be more deliberate about, and something that I plan to be definitely at least do for a little bit here before I get back to work on Edenic Season 2, because that's going to be the main major project that I'm going to be focused on once these ones wrap up. But yeah, that's a kind of a little bit of where my headspace is at going into making the decision to make this a seasonal podcast rather than, we would have liked to do it as a weekly thing, but that's just not feasible without a crew, I think is the thing. Like, I think we could do this as a weekly thing if we weren't also the editors and distributors and marketers, and managers and producers.
Yeah, because doing this all on our own, just like with anything else that we do, it's a lot of work. And because we're doing a lot of things that, in theory, if we were just directors, if we were just the talent or the voices of a podcast, if we were just our ideal to pick your title for a project, we could do all those things all at once, but we're not. We're also everything else in that project. And because we're doing all these other things that we feel like we should be able to do all at once, which, in time, maybe we can, in practice, we have to make up for all of the other jobs that we have to fill with everything else that we do, and then we fill all of our time, and all of our time can't be spent on multiple projects.
Yeah, it just can't. The time just doesn't exist.
Mathematically, doesn't work out that way.
Yeah, which and I think just like sleep is important too, and I feel like that's always,
you would think,
for hyper productive people such as us who just tend to live that kind of lifestyle, that tends to be the first thing that gets deprioritized, right? Because it's easy to not do. And
it is very easy to not do.
Yeah. And so that's something I hope we can also address as we kind of clear up our frame a little bit more. But that being said, we're still here. We're still going to be creating. We're just going to be changing our strategy in a way that is both that is both healthier and ultimately probably better for what we want out of it, right? In terms of what we want artistically, what we want for our careers and things of that nature. So, if you ask, it's like, again, Resident Roleplay ending with Prometheus, this podcast ending, is like, those have both kept us with regular stream of content for actually a little bit of a season here. And with those cleared, it's like, okay, we're going to have a solid bit of time. So I guess if you would ask me immediately what I'm going to be doing with that time, like I said, probably going to take a brief sabbatical and then focusing fully into Edenic Season 2. But also, as that progresses and as I find time, I also want to focus more on my writing, because I still consider myself first and foremost a writer. And I just haven't gotten to do pure writing in such a long time. I've done a lot of writing for projects, but I haven't been able to stop and just write prose, write a screenplay, write something like these projects. I have a lot of projects I'm really passionate about that I just haven't had the ability to give time to. And so I'm hoping to free that up just in terms of writing, in terms of scratching that itch. Because I have a lot of stuff that I still need to get to. I still have a novel manuscript that I need to finish revising.
I want to read it.
Yeah, that I'm incredibly passionate about. And I'm like, why did this stuff have to fall on the back burner? And it's largely because I'm trying to do too many jobs. And ultimately, I need to be able to prioritize on the things that I want most. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. And that's where I'm heading.
Yeah, like with me, part of the reason I'm even coming to Australia is because I'm trying to further my career. I've got some opportunities here to do a lot of film stuff, either as talent or as crew. I got some editing or other production stuff that I could do here, and it's like,
as well as some stunt work and talent work that you've already done.
Yeah, as well as some work and talent work that I've already done. Still stuff I'm not getting paid for, but still,
you're getting your foot in the door.
Stuff that's not mine, right?
Yeah,
and it's great being able to do this as work. However, it's gonna get to a point where I'm going to have to pick this as, if I want this to be my career, I'm gonna have to pick this or all of the other projects that we're doing, and all the other projects that we're doing, unfortunately, just they're not helping as much as they used to. All those things got me to this point where I can now do this as a job and have the opportunity to be able to, present a acting or a stunt reel to a talent agency and say, like, this is what I can do. Here's the kind of work that I can do, and here's my experience. So continuing to do that doesn't benefit me anymore. And all this is just practice. And I'm getting to the point now where practice is over. It's time to do.
Yeah.
And I'm doing. And yeah, if I want to do this, because this is fun. This is extremely fun. But that's not going to help me get further.
Yeah.
And it's not going to it's not going to continue my career. Once I've got my career, then I can fall back and come back and do these as hobbies when I have more time, when I have the
resources too.
When I have the resources and have the ability to say, you know what? I don't have to do this right now. I can just take a break and not worry about missing a week of content or whatever, right? And just being able to do it for fun and being able to do it, like you said, as an artist who also happens to have a YouTube channel.
Yeah. And not to say that our goals here are entirely pragmatic, right? Where it's just like we would want to abandon it if it doesn't further our career, right? I think its purpose still stands as a place to host the things, the projects that are entirely our own.
Yeah. Exactly.
But the thing is, we also, like you said, like we're also desiring to get apply all the practice that we've gained here in a way that can bring us into that next step, right? Because I think we've gotten to that point where we've kind of plateaued in our growth, and we won't be able to get to that next step without branching out a little bit more, without giving ourselves to other people's projects that are larger than our own, and without and with the resources and experiences we gain from that will naturally, inevitably, improve what we're doing here. And it just becomes just a much better feedback loop than having the one stream in its own vacuum.
And that's the thing that I think we failed to not account for, but maybe we thought we might have fallen victim to maybe hubris back in the day when we thought we could do it all on our own the entire time. And I was like, it was just going to be us and we only needed us. But having that collaborative aspect and being able to reach out and be a part of other people's projects is a massive part of being not only a creator, but like in this industry of being a filmmaker and being just this kind of storyteller that we would like to become. The collaboration and being a part of other people's projects is such a huge part of the role. And yeah, I think we're now getting to the point where offering ourselves as, I don't know what you would call it, just like as artists to other people, or to, getting other people's projects.
Or even not entirely that, in my case, like just doing more spec writing, right? And things like that.
Yeah.
Like that is a career furthering thing that is still technically entirely my own, right? Until it gets into a publisher's hands, right? So it's like, or an agent's hands, right? Or gets out onto the script market. It's like, that like either way, there are things outside of what we are doing here that are going to further us and generally.
Reaching out. Yeah. But and that's you're saying actually like what you're gonna do after, because like I actually, when it comes to what I want to do on the channel after, like I know all the short-term stuff that I want to do, like obviously I want to continue my career as a stunt person and as an actor and try to get into talent, but that's like my thing. Like when it comes to the channel, like I know I've got I have a D&D game that I want to get started.
Mm-hmm.
I know I've got there's a lot of systems that I want to, game systems that I want to complete and then play test on the channel. That would be fantastic. But it's like, when it comes down to it, like I don't really have too much like long-term stuff. Like I feel like that's going to, like that's not something that's like normal, I should say. Like we used to have like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this, and all this other stuff for the channel. I was like, no, like I think I've got just like a couple things I want to do, and then if I have another idea, that'll be it. Like I'll just have another idea and then I'll try to do it. And being able to have that freedom of just like, if I have an idea, I have an idea for the channel is different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like I said, being able to focus on the larger scale projects on here, right? Because it's like, if we put like the same amount of work that we put into the collective of the smaller scale projects into one major one, I feel like that it would be just more creatively satisfying, and be more in line with how we want this channel to be presented, right? Like as a almost as a brand, but like as a as a hub for extraordinary creative work that you don't see every day on YouTube. So, and of course, being able to expand that, which we've been doing a lot lately, and bring more people into the fold. Our kind of in-house rotation of our kind of central team has kind of evolved a lot over the past couple of years. And that's been kind of delightful to see, right? It is not just a 2-person thing, but we would like to expand that even more. And that's something that really happens when we focus on these larger scale projects and focus on the work that we do outside of the channel. I guess that's kind of where we're at. And I guess that's basically all there is to it. That is us winding down this first season of the Hypercube podcast. I should say, as a closing note, with regard to how we view the podcast in general, right? We kind of designed this podcast. Our design principle was to basically recreate the conversations that we have when we're not recording in a recorded format for people's enjoyment. Right. Just because we recognize that we're throwing out so much content that would be quality if it were recorded.
Yeah.
And so by that token, the podcast is definitely still something I would love to be a constant, right? Like it'll be in spurts and seasons, but always be something that we could come back to, because this has been actually a really fulfilling outlet for me in terms of being able to get some of our ideas out there. And I kind of like the idea of taking in seasons because it gives it, I think, each individual episode more of a value where you do actually have a chance to catch up on it if you fell behind, or you do have a chance to go back and re-listen to specific things. And it gives each individual episode and each individual subject we tackle more of a weight, which is kind of how I think I like these things viewed more generally, right? Where each one is its own special thing. And so, and I know with a lot of podcasts, it's like, it's hard to have that, right? Like if you fall behind, there's no catching up, you know, because they come out so regularly. And
or some podcasts, like catching up isn't really an intended way of viewing.
That's true.
It's just listen to the latest one because it's all not the same, but it's like, you know, you don't have to hear all the episodes.
Exactly.
Just, catch up with the latest one. If it's especially if it's more personality driven type of podcast where just listen to the latest one and you're caught right up.
Exactly. But with this, even if we won't be entirely, even if it means we won't necessarily be able to be entirely topical all the time, I do really like the idea of having each episode be more, not necessarily of a standalone thing, but each episode being something that is more of an occasion, right? That is more of a like something that we can reference to, right? Where we could say, look at this individual episode where we go over these topics. And because, we are establishing a lot of things here and a lot of our thoughts and a lot of our views and a lot of our positions, as well as a lot of kind of deeper discussions on and ruminations, just meditations on subjects that we often talk about. And having those fewer episodes that are more focused, where we could say, okay, we know we cover that topic in that episode, and you don't have to sift through a sea of episodes. So... And I kind of think there's a value in that too. But I love having this as an outlet. I just love our conversations. And this has honestly been one of the few ways to keep them consistent as we've grown more physically distant, you know? So I really love it for that too. And also it's just been a neat outlet to be able to have guests on that we wouldn't otherwise be able to have very directly in our work, right? Like, we've had a couple of guests, we've had some interviews, and it's like, that's really cool. And like I said, we've gotten to know some interesting people, and we've gotten a more expansive network of people that I would love to get to know better. And we have a place for that now, right? We have a place where we could talk to other artists if we want to, right? Where we could just converse with them. And
we have a platform where we can use to expand on anything that we would like to do when it comes to like all the creative collaborations that we have, right? Where we do projects with other people. This is a place where we can expand with our like personal, I guess, collaborations with people, and so bring them in, interview them, and get to know them as people rather than just credits.
Yeah, exactly. So this affords a lot of interesting opportunity that way. But the Hypercube podcast, I definitely think is something that's going to stick around as the sort of flagship podcast of P-Cubed for the foreseeable future. And it's definitely something that we want to use to be able to have a lot of the deeper conversations and reveal more of our thought process and kind of how we talk and how we live our lives in doing so, and have more of that outside of just our work. So, that being said, I guess this is our season 1 finale for the Hypercube podcast, and we'll be back in 2023, Lord willing, with more episodes. And I definitely know some topics we got to hit right off the bat. There are definitely some that are left over from this season.
We have so much left over.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think I would love to see you finish your gender series next time. And I definitely think we need to, in fact, I'll make the promise now that we'll start off with the Creative Heroes episode, because that's one I've been eager to do.
Yes, we said we were supposed to do that. Yeah,
that's one I've been eager to do. So, because I think that I'm just eager to do it just for us to each other as well as us to an audience, right? Because it's like I want to know what principles you gained from the creative heroes that you most admire, and I think you don't necessarily know mine either, and so that's going to be
I have to come up with
a learning experience.
I have to come up with like a what do you call that, like a short list. Like I'm trying to limit it to what I think we said, like 3 or 5.
I had 4. I have 4.
4.
Yeah. So yeah, but I mean, you do you, but that's definitely one we'll have to hit as well. So we definitely have a number of things to continue here, but yeah, I look forward to it, and I look forward to what projects we're going to be working on in the meantime, and being able to take a breather.
Yeah, being able to just stop and smell the roses, I guess.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly lots of roses to smell right now, because I also just realized that works on a number of levels.
That's how I meant it.
Oh no. I just got that. But that's the thing is that's a complete other reason that we didn't even touch on here. That is also very substantial, is the fact that, our personal lives have just been crazy lately and in flux. And I think we just need some time to stop and enjoy that and focus on that a bit, because ultimately I think we've been kind of drawn into, because ultimately that's the thing that matters most, is your interpersonal relations. And that's something that requires deliberation and curation as well.
Yeah. Because we don't want to end up being workaholics and focusing too much on our work and our career, and not focusing on the people around us.
And the next thing you know, you're divorced and you have an addiction to alcohol. And you're middle-aged.
Oh no, that's the worst part.
And balding.
Second worst part.
All right, well, thank you all very much for listening. This has been the Hypercube podcast. This show is edited by Loryn Pacheco, mixed by Raphael Pacheco, with theme music by Mono Memory. Until next time, we'll see y'all later. God bless.
Hey, see you later.